Hey, it's Freitag. In this podcast, we interview business owners in New Hampshire and beyond to get their perspective on work, growth, and of course, the weekend. Join our host, Freitag marketing owner Jan Ziegler, as he interviews fascinating guests. We hope you'll enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Freitag. I'm Jan, and today I'm joined by Steve Fortier, who is the Administrator of Rural Economic Development at the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs, which makes you officially the guy with the longest job title of all time. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Jan.
Let's talk about how you ended up where you are now, having this cryptic title and this cryptic job that kind of I feel like you're just everywhere all the time talking to people. But where did it all start?
Yeah, so I've been in really community development, community building, community organizing my entire life since Keene State. Graduated from Keene State in '86. So I think that's the theme that runs through it. And I have lived in rural New Hampshire my entire life. So 62 years and later this week. So, I think that being part of my DNA has helped, in my role with the state. But it comes after lots of other work since the mid-'80s in, nonprofits of different sizes and different scopes. And I have a consulting company that I formed in 1994 called Communiteam, T-E-A-M at the end instead of T-Y. That's really about building community partnerships, particularly between youth and adults, to change communities, make them better. So it all ties together.
So so one of your sort of bigger first roles was as the executive director of the Meeting Waters YMCA, which is Bellows Falls, I believe.
Yeah, well, just an office with 3 people in it in Bellows Falls. The programs are in 4 counties in 2 states. So in Cheshire, Sullivan on the New Hampshire side, and Windsor and Windham counties on the Vermont side. So huge scope geographically. With 3 people at a headquarters in Bellows Falls. Now my wife is the CEO of that Y. We were co-directors when I was there for a big chunk of my career.
Yeah, I was just going to say, your LinkedIn, I think you said something like almost 19 years.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about what that was like, sort of that, because I think especially what I encounter, and this comes up often, is people either work in Vermont or in New Hampshire. There's the river is wide.
Yeah.
And I guess that Y does it both. So how was that?
Yeah, and even the title, if you think about it, the name of the organization of Meeting Waters is so symbolic for me, and I play up on symbolism a lot in my leadership style. And so the summer camp is a great example. It's in Springfield, Vermont. It's almost at the end of the bridge coming over from Charlestown. It's right on Route 5, just a couple hundred meters up from when you cross over into Vermont from New Hampshire. There will be 80 campers a week for 8 weeks throughout the summer, about 2/3 from Vermont, and because the after-school programs are mainly based in Vermont, so the same kids and families will come to camp. But the friendships that are made, my son is a great example. When he was 6, he started attending camp. We needed it for his childcare, right? So we were busy running the Y. And he met Logan Ziddick from Springfield, Vermont. They are still best friends. I was at Sean's, where he's building a new house in Kirby, Vermont last Saturday. And we got little attention, my wife and me, because he was on the phone with Logan for the hour that we were there at the home building site. So, that's almost 30 years later that friendship is still there, and lots of examples like that. So it's really neat and I know that's been a theme on a couple of your podcasts with other guests. And I think Meeting Waters Y is doing a great job of, and we have with other coalitions that we built and all. The river does not need to be a barrier.
Okay, that's really cool. And so you went from working in nonprofits for almost 3 decades to Keene State and did higher ed and I think external relations. That was your first Keene-centric role, right? That really brought you into the town. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I'd have breakfast with President Hewitt about quarterly, just random. And we'd sit at Tamalians and have a breakfast. And I had been to 2 events, including one with Robert Putnam, famous author, Bowling Alone and Our Kids and other social type books. And I said, I've been to these events and I wish I had known about them. The Robert Putnam one even offered CEUs for people who were in attendance. I could have brought my entire Y staff to that. And it was around his, at the time, new book, Our Kids. And so I said, I think that Keene State is an amazing resource for the larger community, Franklin County, Windham County, Cheshire County, and vice versa, that there are resources out in those communities that would be extremely valuable to Keene State College. She said, go back and write up a job description. So I did. And was the first ever person in that position, and the last. But I
mean that's like kind of like a dream come true, no? I mean, like whenever I got to do this one. I mean, before starting the business, I got to do this once where somebody's like, I want to hire you, like write your job, and it's like the best thing that can ever possibly happen, right? Because I mean, like clearly you're passionate about it, otherwise you wouldn't talk about it in the first place, and then to have the chance and get to actually implement it.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about sort of what that was and how that, because I mean, external relations, like it's like in my organization, Alana's title, which is like very broad.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah. I had really two major buckets, I guess, that you could say, of activities. One was government relations. So I handled that at the local, state, and federal level. So spending a lot of time with our elected leaders at those levels, which is great, and bringing them to campus. And we had some great listening sessions with our senators, for example, on accessibility and affordability in particular. And the neat thing was I'd then turn on C-SPAN or whatever, see a clip on social media and hear a story that they had pulled from the conversation with students or faculty or alums at Keene State. And then the other was the truly more community relations and building partnerships throughout. So being an example of that would be being Keene State's liaison to what was at the time called the Ecovation Training Consortium. And we were trying to build a training system in eco-friendly businesses. So a partnership with Greenfield Community College, SIT, Antioch, and Keene State College. And it was quite formal at the time. Then SIT went out of business. Antioch had to pull back a bit with some financial challenges and all. And unfortunately, that sort of faded away, although some of the work has continued.
Cool. And then that was kind of like COVID was the trigger sort of for the end of that, right?
Yeah. All the institutions of the university system had to refund students for all of their unused room and board and rec fees and dining hall fees and all. I believe I heard the figure at Keene State, it was $8 million. And so dozens, if not hundreds of us, were positions were eliminated in phases. And the first wave was stated to us as anyone without a direct impact on students. I could argue that I was, because we're, again, working with the federal delegation on accessibility and affordability, and with the New Hampshire legislature on investment in the university system, in the state appropriations. But, that I do understand that I wasn't teaching, I wasn't running a program. So, yeah, it was in that first wave. Unfortunately, Melinda's remains quite sad about that. We are still very close. I'm working with her on some projects in my new role, it was a painful conversation, not only for me but for her as well, when she had to let me know.
And then you kind of made this shift with like looking at your CV. You shifted from education, nonprofits, all that to business, right? In the like that's what you do now at the Department of Business, Economic Affairs. So tell me a bit about what you do, because I feel like seeing what you do and talking to you seems like you have a hand in everything, and like you talk to everyone and everybody knows you. Like I think there's not many people that are connected to as many different people as you are, I think. What do you actually do?
Good question. Yeah, no, I think you're right. You just said the word connecting, connector a lot. And so after Keene State, I was quite fortunate, and I guess they were fortunate too, but Phil at the Chamber had just gotten some CARES Act money, and he needed a project manager to manage what he had told BEA, in fact, that he was going to do with the money that he was getting. Looked to me, which was fortunate for me at my age, not particularly employable anymore, and so that was helpful. And then as that was winding down, George Hansel was the board chair of Monadnock Economic Development Corporation at the time, and they decided to hit pause. The board decided to hit pause on lending and big projects and just build the infrastructure up again, build the board up, and find some a more balanced financial model and asked me if I would come for a year to help with that. So I share those two parts because it does in fact lead to BEA. When the commissioner, I first got a LinkedIn message from the Commissioner Caswell, when I'd applied, just acknowledging that, he was delighted that a connector like me was interested in this particular role at BEA. So yeah, I think that does summarize, regardless of whether it's co-organizing the Keene Area Manufacturers Consortium with Mayor Khan, or what I did on Friday. I helped organize a meeting of key stakeholders with the new USDA Rural Development State Director for Vermont and New Hampshire. And about 20 of us gathered with him and to learn more about where they're headed as a federal agency and more about him as the new leader. I'll be doing that on Wednesday. And Connector tomorrow over in Manchester, the New Hampshire Tech Alliance has their New England National Security Conference. And I had the director and the event and engagement manager over to the area just 3 weeks ago along with the executive director of the New Hampshire Aerospace and Defense Consortium and three leaders of the New Hampshire Manufacturers Extension Partnership. And I did a tour with them of aerospace and defense contractors in the area. And that was on a Friday. And on Monday, I opened up my laptop, turned on email, and Julie, the executive director of the Tech Alliance, had written to say, "Thank you. We were so impressed with each individual company we went to. We're even more impressed with the ecosystem that is there in the Monadnock region, where they're all supporting each other's success. We worked over the weekend to carve out a half hour. Would you and some of your members be interested in coming over and being a panel within the National Security Conference?" So that's tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So do you think, generally speaking, because, you're not just responsible for the Monadnock region, right? You have, is it all counties or?
The 6 rural is my main focus, and then some of the smaller municipalities.
Yeah. So do you find because I feel like, we talk a lot about the Monadnock region here, obviously. This is where we are. This is the podcast is about that. But I feel like there is, even though, Manchester's not all that far away and Concord is that is its entire own ecosystem that doesn't care about anything outside of that, Merrimack, Hillsborough County. And I think whenever I look at the statewide programs, they never reach out here. Whether it is things like Stay Work Play. They came out once, but it's very much like Manchester, Concord, Nashua centered, maybe Seacoast, and we're kind of probably in Coos County they don't feel differently, but it's probably the same thing. But out here in the Monadnock region, we're kind of separated by the Hillsborough County line. Do you think that's accurate, or you think is actually much more interwoven and I just don't see it?
No, I do think that's accurate, and I think that it's really important that the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs has this role. Not many states do. I look to Michigan a lot for seeing what they're up to. It has a department focused on rural, a few other states. So I think, having the voice of rural, again, 62 years of history living here, right, and growing up in the Lakes region and being here in the Monadnock region since 81, so that my lived experience is valuable. And then I think, again, the skill that I happen to have around connecting is important. So I'll be in Lancaster for a regional event on Wednesday morning, and it's important to show up. And I have to remind myself that while I live in the Monadnock region, right, that my work does reach out. So I was in Plymouth last Friday, Plymouth and Northfield, right? And so I think being there and building those connections and fostering those relationships in those areas are really important as well, because we're it. There's not large institutions, there's not large businesses to underwrite, the nonprofit sector and all that they're doing. So it really is about bringing people together and recognizing the value that each person and each entity brings to the table.
Yeah, I think that we benefit here in the Monadnock region still from having a few economic powerhouses that support the nonprofit sector, and they're very involved, and they write big checks, which probably other regions don't have. I think that's we're very, very lucky that we happen to have that. But I think can you tell me probably in Coos County it looks a little different. There's probably not that many big corporations that can fund the nonprofit sector.
Yeah, yes, that's definitely true. And yet there are some pockets of really inspiring examples of companies that are stepping up and building housing for their employees, yes, and any extras for the larger community, workforce housing. I will tell you that the childcare consortium in Coos County is the state model. And I'm active with them. I'm up there a lot for events and other things that they're doing, ribbon cuttings, et cetera. I'll be up in North Conway in 2 weeks talking with child care providers, but businesses are also stepping up there to help support those efforts in their own self-interest, right? And because in some areas of Coos County, currently a parent is driving an hour each way from their home to the child care provider and then to work. And that's just not a sustainable model. So we're really trying to build out, but also it will require the businesses themselves to realize it's in their self-interest to get behind those initiatives.
So maybe that's something we could learn here from, because I feel like especially like, early childhood education and childcare, while it's important here, it's, I don't think so, like, it's not the focus. Like, I feel like everybody here talks about housing all the time. And yes, we need housing, and yes, we get short on housing, but there's other issues as well that make it hard, and childcare being one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where MEDC's Bring It Home project, in partnership with Hannah Grimes and others, is really important. And the Y stepping up and broadening their wings and taking over, another center, early care center that closed recently. And it's part of your efforts. It's part of Julie's efforts at the collaborative to get more young families to the area. We can't do that without the two things you just mentioned: more affordable housing and the early care and education that the parents will need. And so if we're coming up short in those areas, it's going to be really hard to attract the workforce that we want, and that, lots of other amenities are lined up to do. Beautiful. I just did a walk on the rail trail before coming here, and did a meeting actually while doing that. So we have so many other amenities, but at the end of the day, it does boil down to housing and childcare too.
So let's talk a little bit about the Keene Area Manufacturers Consortium, because it's really interesting. Because there is, yes, obviously a bunch of manufacturers that make a bunch of different things, but there's a bunch of like frenemies, right?
Yeah.
Like they kind of like know they exist, they compete. Some of them are each other's customers. Like that, there's this wild mix of direct competition. And actually, somebody asked me this, like, how do we end up with the niches here that we have, like optics and like precision? Do you know where that comes from?
Yeah, I mean, I've studied the history a little bit, and actually I just took a picture of the sign along the bike path that talks about that, right? And the number of employees and the impact of the precision manufacturing. I think, the Precision Valley, as I understand it, is on both sides of the river again, right? Including, epicenters in Springfield, Vermont, and Keene, New Hampshire, and the particular industry cluster around optics, which is super exciting, and people I've brought here from statewide organizations are blown away every time. And so that began, as I understand it, in the 60s. And then, the frenemy thing is that a lot of the companies are spin-offs of the original. As I read the history, it kind of began with Precitech, and then people have gone on, including your neighbor here just next door, Contour, where people have left one company, started another, and we all benefit from it, I think. There's just a little nuance between them. But I will say, when I was at Keene State College, the Keene Area Manufacturers Consortium kind of, I'll say started up again. It was known as ARCAN. Starting in 2010, there was a couple grants behind that. And then George Hansel had the vision of, let's get us back together. We don't need grants. We don't need structure. We're not incorporated. We're really, organizationally speaking, we're nothing. We're a group of people that chooses to come together under this title. And that is what you talked about a minute ago, is what really impressed me from the get-go of seeing competitors in the room coming together for the shared challenges of workforce, of other things. And what we are now seeing is, we're beyond that. We're now building new partnerships. I'm a big part of rural economic development has got to be circular economies, right? We've got to keep our resources in the community or in the region circulating around. So to see that a byproduct of a conversation after a Keene Area Manufacturers Consortium meeting is a fabricator who said, I've got extra capacity in our metal fabrication part of our business. And two other companies saying, we need more capacity locally to build the shells of whatever chilling machine we're making or other things, a nanotech precision diamond turning machine. So we're seeing a lot of that, and I think is part of why Tech Alliance picked up on that on their visit and asked to showcase at this huge conference.
Because instead of like a big one who needs capacity going to like a nationwide, who can help us here, like subcontract this part of our production because we need it, now they know to like sort of search locally first.
Yeah. It's neat that a good example is Sunset Tool, small manufacturing facility on Optical Ave. Family-owned, 3 generations, still actively leading the company. And Cody, the youngest, the grandson of the founders, and stood up one day and said, "Most of you know our name, and most of you, we're producing for most of you. We're doing a component of a machine to almost everyone. Yet others of us in the room who are not in that space of manufacturing, maybe it's a support organization like the community college or the Keene State College or the CTE, they're very active with us, or Apprenticeship NH, may not know Sunset Tool because it's a pretty small company relative to the big players in the area, yet they are manufacturing components for at least half the organizations in the room. So that's been neat. So we have the mailing list is now up to 126 people as of this morning, and over half of them show up on a quarterly basis. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, that is really cool. And it reminds me actually a lot of like the Stuttgart, Germany area that I grew up in, where, we have Mercedes, we have Porsche, and then you have these thousands of companies that build like this little piece that somewhere goes, I don't know, like the nut for the rim of a Mercedes or something like that. Like, they're everywhere, and they're like these small buildings and industrial parks that look like nothing, but they make like this one piece, and they make 10,000 of them, but it's a very precise piece. And so it's very funny how like I randomly ended up in this area where it's this very similar cluster of manufacturing that reminds me so much of that like at some point Mercedes happened to be a guy from Stuttgart, Germany, and like that's where he built his first factory. And then like this entire ecosystem that now supports the entire state is, it's a bit of a problem right now because the combustion engine isn't as popular as it once was, but I think it's so funny to me that it's like the similarity. I'm like always like, this is a lot like home.
I'll tell you quickly because it's kind of a foreshadowing. I think we'll have some other guests related to this story, but as a result of the March meeting of the Keene Area Manufacturers Consortium, which Congresswoman Goodlander was our featured guest that day, 2 guys in a barn in Gilsum, New Hampshire, have a technology they had just figured out after 8 years of R&D on their own dime, how to recycle germanium from decommissioned military components, sights on machine guns, periscopes on Navy vessels, all of that. Germanium is a national security crisis right now because China has 96% of all germanium in the world, and they're not shipping it to the U.S., even if we could afford it. So these guys have figured out how to recycle it. John, the founder and CEO, co-founder and CEO, is on the panel at the Tech Alliance National Security Conference, but that they had been stalled with accessing the decommissioned components to be able to pull the germanium out of them until Congresswoman Goodlander heard about it. And then I had Randy McKee from the New Hampshire Aerospace and Defense Consortium come over, and I had them, the 2 co-founders, come to BEA and meet with our director and our government contracting arm called Apex Accelerator. Between the Congresswoman, Randy at the Aerospace and Defense Consortium, and my colleague Dave at Apex Accelerator, we've gotten them to the highest levels of the Department of Defense in the Pentagon to push this issue of the National Defense Stockpile releasing the components so they can recycle the germanium. Okay. Crazy story. That
is a crazy story because it's like it starts so small here, right? But like it solves apparently this. I had no idea, right? But like it solves this issue at a national level. That it's 2 a good business case, but also
Gilsum.
Exactly, and Gilsum of all places. I think that's a fascinating story. In case you're wondering what Steve does every day, he gets the people if you're in a barn in Gilsum, I can help you get into the Pentagon. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. So. What is what are the challenges sort of that you see for businesses in the next 3 to 5 years? I feel like we're right now in like this inflection point where we have this housing problem. We don't have to talk about it because we've talked about it plenty. We have tariffs, maybe not, maybe more, like who knows? And then the economy is maybe slowing down. Like I'm not an economist, but certainly looks that way. what do you see like the main challenges for the region for the next?
Yeah, what I hear consistently of anywhere, and businesses of any size, and communities of any size, and nonprofits of any size, is the word uncertainty, right? Do we invest in this expansion? So the uncertainty is I think the major challenge right now for all of us.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, because I think, obviously, especially in manufacturing, I would assume that your investments in expansion or in anything, they're so huge that you kind of need to be able to plan for 15, 20 years to like make your money back.
Yeah. So, I'm happy to say we're not seeing any contraction right now. We're not seeing any downsizing right now. People are still hiring. So, we'll hope that wave can continue. But again, hard to make big investments in big projects right now. And we have a few companies that really do need to expand. They're in order to grow, a couple of major manufacturers. And so the uncertainty is holding them back from doing what they need to do in order to grow their business and meet the large, then it ripples out from there, right? They need to grow their business to meet the demands of the people they serve, the companies that they're working with and being a vendor for. So it ripples out from there.
Cool. Let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about it's Freitag. We air these on Freitags on Fridays. Freitag has become so normal in my vocabulary that I don't think of saying Friday anymore. And then I'm like, half the people here don't understand me. What does a good weekend look like for you? It sounds like very exciting news are around the corner and imminent, but and that's probably going to be the rest of your year. But what do you like to do for fun?
Yeah, so we're about to have a second grandchild. And so, family really, I guess, has really always been the weekends. Both children were athletes growing up. And so that involved, traveling a lot on weekends for that. And for my own, I used to be a competitive cyclist. Nowadays, it's still about family, but it's an expanded family. And both of our adult children happen to live within a few miles of each other in Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. So every other weekend we'll be visiting with them, doing outdoor related activities there. And then here we spend a lot of time on the rail trails and shopping while we're in the big city from Alstead. And just taking, spending a day recreating and shopping. And I like to cook, so we plan out some meals ahead of time and do that. So
Yeah. What do you like cooking?
I'm all over the place. Spicy. So do a lot of ethnic-related cooking, Middle Eastern, African. Tonight's is Italian. So, all over the place.
I love it. So you're a frequent customer at the Keene International Market?
Yeah, I am. And the co-op in Hannaford. Yeah, you bet. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on, Steve. Really appreciate it. And if you want to get in touch with Steve, he's everywhere. He's not hard to find. You can find him on LinkedIn, send him an email. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that was a great conversation. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a nice review wherever you're listening to this. It really means the world. Our episodes drop every Friday, so stay tuned for more insightful chats from It's Freitag.